Marcus Freeman has lived long enough in college football's pressure cooker to understand that disappointment is inevitable, but excuses are optional. And when he stood before reporters Wednesday, the Notre Dame head coach made it clear that while the sting of being left out of the college football playoffs still lingers, it will not define his program or his leadership. Freeman did not deny the frustration, did not pretend the moment passed quietly, and did not shy away from acknowledging how close the Fighting Irish believed they were to breaking through into the expanded 12-team field. Instead, he chose a tone that reflected both accountability and resolve, dialing back the raw emotion that had marked the program's immediate response in the aftermath and replacing it with something more deliberate and perhaps more dangerous for opponents going forward. A little more than a month removed from Selection Sunday, Freeman framed the omission not as a grievance to be litigated endlessly, but as a reminder of the unforgiving standard Notre Dame must meet if it wants to eliminate doubt entirely in future seasons. He acknowledged openly that the decision was disappointing, that it hurt, and that it was confusing in places, but he also made clear that dwelling on it serves no competitive purpose. What matters, in his view, is what the Irish do next, because ultimately the power to avoid that fate again lies not with the selection committee, not with conference politics, and not with shifting criteria, but with the product Notre Dame puts on the field. Freeman emphasized that responsibility repeatedly, reminding his players and everyone listening that the only true safeguard against exclusion is dominance, the kind that leaves no room for debate, no reliance on tiebreakers, and no vulnerability to perception. Notre Dame believed it had earned its place when it climbed to number 10 in the committee's penultimate rankings after winning 10 straight games, sitting 2 spots ahead of Miami for the final at-large berth. And from their vantage point, little had changed on the field to justify what followed. Neither the Hurricanes nor the Irish played during championship weekend, while Alabama lost the SEC title game. Yet the committee held the 3-loss Crimson Tide at number 9, elevated Miami to number 10, and pushed Notre Dame down to number 11, making the Irish the first team left out. It was a sequence that sparked outrage within the Notre Dame community, prompting athletic director Pete Bavacqua to publicly criticize the process and float potential fixes, ranging from expanding the field to 16 teams to adjusting how teams are evaluated late in the season. Freeman, however, was careful not to dwell on those external debates, choosing instead to center the conversation on what his program can control, even as the playoff itself unfolded in a way that only intensified the sense of what might have been. Miami validated the committee's faith by storming into the postseason and delivering one of the most remarkable playoff runs in recent memory, winning at number 7 Texas A&M in the opening round, stunning defending national champion and second-seeded Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, and beating Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl to earn a return trip home for the national championship game against unbeaten top-seeded Indiana. Alabama, meanwhile, followed a far different path, avenging an earlier loss to Oklahoma before suffering the worst postseason defeat in school history, a 38-3 dismantling at the hands of Indiana in the Rose Bowl. Those results only added layers to the conversation, fueling arguments on all sides, but Freeman resisted the temptation to use them as validation or condemnation. For him, the lesson remained the same. Notre Dame must be better, must be clearer, and must be undeniable. After the playoff field was announced, Notre Dame's players made the collective decision not to participate in a bowl game, effectively ending their season, and Freeman reiterated that he had no regrets about honoring that choice. He explained that he asked his players multiple times to ensure the decision reflected their true desire, and once convinced it did, he stood behind them fully. Still, he wants the pain of how the season ended to linger just enough to serve as fuel, a reminder to draw upon when complacency threatens to creep in. Freeman spoke about keeping the pain, about using moments like this as reference points when motivation wanes, and about the importance of channeling frustration into preparation rather than resentment. He admitted that aspects of the committee's criteria and rankings remain confusing to him, but he refused to let that confusion become a crutch, reiterating that blaming others others offers no competitive advantage. The message to his players and to the program at large was straightforward and uncompromising. Attack the future, leave no doubt, and remove subjectivity from the equation by making performance the loudest voice in the room. That forward-looking mindset also extended to questions about Freeman's own future, which have become a recurring subplot as his profile continues to rise. As the NFL season wound down, speculation swirled that multiple professional teams had interest in Freeman, rumors that only intensified as more head coaching vacancies opened in recent weeks. Freeman ultimately restructured his contract and reaffirmed his commitment to Notre Dame, but the chatter persisted, prompting repeated questions about whether NFL held long-term appeal. Freeman addressed these directly, stating plainly that he is the head coach at Notre Dame and acknowledging that such speculation, if it continues, would be a reflection of sustained success within the program. He emphasized that Notre Dame already provides everything he personally hopes to achieve, both professionally and as a leader, and while he did not categorically rule out the possibility of coaching in the NFL someday, he framed it as a distant hypothetical consideration rather than an active ambition. He explained that if that day ever comes, it would have to align perfectly in terms of timing and personal conviction, but he has no interest in wasting mental energy on possibilities that are not immediately in front of him. What he knows with certainty, he said, is that he is fully convicted and deeply motivated to be the best head coach he can be for Notre Dame right now, and that conviction is not diluted by outside noise. The news conference itself was convened in part to give Freeman a platform to address accusations stemming from a confrontation with a high school wrestling coach during a recent match involving his son, an incident that briefly pulled him into an unwanted spotlight far removed from football. Freeman opened the session with a 2.5-minute statement, thanking university officials for their swift support and expressing appreciation for local law enforcement and the county prosecutor's office, which reviewed video evidence and witness statements before deciding not to file charges. He spoke candidly about the toll the situation took on his family, condemning what he described as unnecessary sensationalism and clickbait headlines that dragged them through public scrutiny without regard for the facts. He emphasized that he behaved respectfully and professionally while protecting his family, and that should have been the only story. He acknowledged his status as a public figure and the scrutiny that comes with it, but he drew a firm line when it comes to children, insisting that they should never be collateral damage in the pursuit of headlines. With the matter resolved, he said he would not comment further out of respect for everyone involved, making it clear that his focus had returned squarely to football and to the work ahead. Taken together, the themes of the day painted a portrait of a coach intent on turning frustration into purpose, noise into focus, and uncertainty into motivation. Freeman did not posture as a victim of circumstance, nor did he minimize the disappointment of missing the playoff. Instead, he owned it, contextualized it, and redirected it, reinforcing a belief that Notre Dame's path forward is not dependent on persuasion or politics, but on performance. In his view, the expanded playoff era does not reward programs for how close they come, but for how convincingly they separate themselves, and that reality has sharpened his message to his players and staff. If Notre Dame wants to ensure its seat at the table next year and beyond, it must remove all doubt, week after week, from the opening kickoff of the season to its final snap. Freeman's words carried the weight of someone who understands both the privilege and the burden of leading a program like Notre Dame, a place where expectations are relentless and margins for error are thin, but also a place where belief, when paired with execution, can still carry a team exactly where it wants to go.